Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 21. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us here for this jam-packed Wednesday show. Dave, we have so much to talk about. Tomlin press conference, injury news, a lot of it a lot better than where we sat here on Monday. Later in the show, we'll hear from our good friend, Dr. Melanie Friedlander. She breaks down the TJ Watt pec injury, the Najee Harris foot injury, and the status of both of those guys going forward. So a lot to talk about, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing well. And if the season ended today, the Steelers would be preparing to host the Buffalo Bills in the first round of the wild card. No, obviously, look, 1-0 after the first week of the season is a lot better than being 0-1. I know we were excited to get our hands on the all-22 tape right away, and have you recovered from charting those 90-something?
I think it just finished.
Plays? Yeah, I think you did as well, too. And quite a lot to talk. We'll talk about the all-22. Obviously, have Dr. Mel on in this show. And I think on the Friday show, kind of teasing that one already before even getting this show started. It sounds like we're going to have Ben Volen on from, I think, the Boston Globe to help us preview the Patriots game. The Steelers obviously hosting the New England Patriots at Acrisure Stadium on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So let's get after it.
Pittsburgh will not have TJ Watt for this weekend's game against the Patriots, but they should get back Watt sometime this season. So that's the big story, the big headline of the day. Really, since the injury happened, the news has slowly but surely been progressing towards encouraging. We got some more finality from NFL Network yesterday, and of course, Mike Tomlin speaking to reporters as well. Long story short, no surgery needed for TJ Watt. He'll rehab it and should come back in roughly 6 weeks or so, maybe return by the bye week or after the bye week against Philadelphia, week 10 at the latest. So Steelers, very high chance they'll see TJ Watt again this year, which, whenever you saw the injury initially, you thought this guy's done for the year. So obviously he's going to miss a large chunk of time, but coming back to me is just good news on itself. Just the fact that he will return at some point this season.
Man, I think the best report of all of them was TJ Watt posting on Twitter that the Terminator "I'll be back" animated GIF. That trumped everything right there. And as you mentioned, it seemed like the news was continually trending optimistic side there, and I think Mike Tomlin in so many words confirmed it, that it wasn't a worst case scenario during his Tuesday press conference, and we'll now wait and see. There's no rush to do it up until obviously Saturday. They'll probably take their time get as many opinions as they can with Watt before making the decision. But I would at this point now expect TJ Watt to go on the reserve injured list by Saturday at 4:00. And if indeed that does happen, then he will obviously have to miss at least the next 4 games when it comes to that. Now, if they don't place him on the reserve injured list, then maybe there's even the possibility that he returns, sooner. But once you go on that reserve injured list is when some people have asked, is there kind of a retroactive thing? And the short answer to that is no. But I would think that based on obviously it's great news. I mean, it's about as good a news as you could have when it comes to him, especially the lip reading with him coming off the field against the Bengals the other day there, that I would expect sometime by Saturday at 4:00 that he'll be placed on the reserve injured list. And then we'll sit and wait and see when he returns. My kind of thinking, obviously, I don't want to bury the lead here with Dr. Mel and all like that, but my initial thinking or my bet would be that we're not going to see TJ Watt until after the bye week.
Yeah, and Dr. Mo kind of lays out the timeline, so we'll talk about that later in the show. I think at the latest, it'll be Week 10 post-bye. I could even see Week 8, October 30th against the Eagles. I think that's not out of the question. That puts it at basically 6 weeks, and maybe with the Watt factor coming back a little bit sooner than people expected, I think it's either going to be Week 8 or Week 10.
And I thought the biggest thing, or one of the most interesting responses from Tomlin during his press conference on Tuesday was when he was asked about, do you have to kind of protect TJ Watt from himself? And Tomlin's answer was, that's an honor to do it. I'd rather say woe than sick 'em. He says, what are we talking about? We're talking about practice. No, we're talking about protecting a highly competitive, talented guy. He says, that's the job. So I'm not going to act like that's a problem. And that's in this situation, that's obviously a good problem to have. He was asked if, can you definitively say that surgery has been ruled out? Tomlin said, I can't definitively say anything when we're pursuing second and third opinions. I would think by Saturday, they will have the second, third, fourth, or fifth, or however many opinions that they need on that. But the fact, going back to really the biggest breaking news of it all, was TJ Watt basically saying, I'm going to be back this season there, and that should trump everything that's out there right now.
Definitely. And in terms of our decision, Tomlin said they won't make that decision essentially until later in the week. So as you said, Saturday afternoon will be kind of the key moment to watch to see if Watt officially goes on IR or not. It certainly would make sense for him to do so. It's very unlikely he would come back within 4 games, so free up the roster spot. That would be logical, but we'll see what the team decides.
Right. And as far as trying to fill, how do you fill those shoes? Even 2 or 3 guys aren't going to completely fill it, but they obviously traded for Malik Reed ahead of the start of the season there, and got Jameer Jones back on the roster there. We'll have to see, what happens. Who is the 4th outside linebacker? If indeed they decide to go with one, I would think they would. But part of the Saturday moves, if I was to bet on, I would bet on maybe Delonte Scott being elevated, unless now that obviously practice. We haven't seen a report this morning. There was a report obviously on Tuesday about them signing Ryan Anderson to the practice squad, but I would think kind of the newness and all like that he probably wouldn't be an ideal candidate, plus the whole special teams factor and all like that being involved. I would kind of bet on Delonte Scott being the one brought off the practice squad to serve as that 4th outside linebacker. And then I would expect a heavy dose of Malik Reed and Jameer Jones kind of rotation, if you will, against the Patriots, probably with Malik Reed getting the higher volume of snaps in that. And Delonte Scott might see the field a couple of snaps here and there outside of special teams in that game.
Yeah, even the number 4 outside linebacker, how many snaps did Jameer Jones play last week? Now, granted, they were on the field for a ton of snaps, but that number 4 could still see about 7 to 10 snaps, and they may have a heavier rotation because they don't have a stud in TJ Watt. So how does this team replace Watt? It's obviously difficult to do. It's partially individual. Malik Reed will be the starting left outside linebacker, but I think there's a lot of schematic elements and changes to it as well. Pittsburgh may have to blitz more. They really not blitzed a lot last year, even in this Bengals game. A lot of, when they did, it was 4-man pressure because they had the pass rush to get home without having to send additional people. That may have to change a little bit until TJ Watt returns. They may scheme things up where they actually may run a bit more 3-3-5. They actually ran some of that against the Bengals. That may become a bigger package whenever you have 2 inside linebackers, 1 outside linebacker, and 3 defensive linemen. So 3 D linemen and 3 linebackers. So it's probably partial scheme, partial personnel. And even then, obviously replicating what Watt does is hard to do exactly.
You get so spoiled these last, several years with the Steelers being able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks with just 4 and sometimes even just 3 guys getting after the quarterback. And you harken back to kind of the later days of Dick LeBeau when they were having to be super creative with sending numbers and how that impacted, the secondary, that way. So that is something to really, really pay attention to in this game against the Patriots is, how many times are they rushing only 4, and how effective is that 4-man rush? And look, it all starts with stopping the run on early downs, right? Getting the opposing offense into more where they're behind the chains, where it's more predictable. Are you going to have to send Millette? Are you going to have to send these corners or safeties to try to get that pressure? So, I would think at the start of this game, you would try to maybe see how your 4-man pressures do. And then if you're not able to get the pressure, then obviously you're going to have to start manipulating that and maybe sending, like you said. So, look, one thing that we know Devin Bush does do is he does blitz from inside fairly well.
Yeah, had a pressure on that. Alex Highsmith forced fumble, came up, free up the middle, and Pittsburgh generally schemes their inside linebackers well to get free or to get one-on-one opportunities against a running back. So we'll see. I mean, there's a balance between, just your standard 4-man rush and then 4-man safe pressure. You think about the Arthur Millette forced fumble at the end of that Bengals game on Sunday. That's a version of their 4-man safe pressure versus when you send 5 and 6 people. So there's kind of different levels and different elements to it. And I think you'll have to, again, lean on that, the latter, the 4-man safe pressure and the 5-6-man traditional blitzes a bit more to compensate for the lack of TJ Watt.
Right. I mean, there's no replacing that guy. That guy,
right.
What that guy does. I mean, you saw it alone in the snaps. Not that you needed to see it to be reminded, but just the game record that he was, in that game alone on Sunday against the Bengals. That's so hard to replace.
As you mentioned, some roster moves coming in, which were expected. The team signing veteran outside linebacker Ryan Anderson to the practice squad, former second-round pick of Washington. 6 career sacks, was most recently with the Giants in 2021, I believe, and then got suspended for 6 games, got released, and did not play all of last year. So it's been a while since he's seen regular season action. As you said, starting on the practice squad, we'll see if he gets elevated or if they turn to the more veteran guy, Delonte Scott, a guy who's been on the roster and with the organization a bit longer. Also, the team making a move at tight end, releasing Justin Rigg, who was signed after roster cutdowns, and signing tight end Rodney Williams, formerly of the Raiders, also released to make room for Anderson, was wide receiver Jacory Roberson. So Anderson, the big name here. Rigg was a little surprising to see him come and go so quickly, but that's the move there.
Yeah, we hardly knew him, right?
Right?
And kind of a guy that just based on the limited amount of tape that I'd seen, kind of interesting as a potential kind of number 2, more blocking tight end. I wonder how much this has to do with potentially, scout team type stuff, because, I mean, you're talking about 2 totally different tight ends.
Oh, yeah. Wow, the body type's totally different.
Yeah, I mean, you got a kind of a squattier, more athletic guy in the new tight end, and obviously Rigg is more of Matt Spaeth type, I guess, if you will. That kind of thing there. So interesting to kind of see the difference in body and athleticism styles from one week to the next, which, the new kid's more of a move tight end, if you will, and not one that you're going to have blocking. And once again, I wonder how much that might be related to preparation for the Patriots.
Right. And Rigg, of course, was a former Bengal. So was that partially related to a little bit of preparation on the Bengals and their personnel? I mean, that's just some tea leaves I'm trying to guess at there. So those are the practice squad moves. And again, we'll see if Anderson comes up at some point here, whether that's Saturday or maybe a little bit later in the season. All right, Dave, Mike Tomlin holding his Tuesday press conference. And of course, as you touched on, did talk about TJ Watt, also talked about Najee Harris. And Harris seems very confident and optimistic he'll play Sunday against the Pats. Mike Tomlin maybe trying to ratchet that down just a little bit and saying, how Harris practices and how he looks during the week will be the team's guide going forward. So mentioned Mason Cole also with an ankle injury suffered in that game. He did finish that game out against the Bengals. Said Cole may be limited at the start of the week, so he probably pops up on today's injury report, but should play on Sunday against the Pats. And then mentioned the other injuries are pretty minor, so I assume that references Robert Spillane, Levi Wallace, DeMarvin Leal. It sounds like all of those guys are good to go for week 2.
Yeah, Najee will be the one to watch, right? And he was on Mad Dog Radio yesterday, and I guess he was badgered a little bit into will you play? I imagine trying to, Adam Shine really didn't attack that. Najee seemed kind of frustrated, I think, or distracted overall during that interview. But in so many words, I mean, he said he's going to practice this week and he's going to play on Sunday. And that was before the Mike Tomlin press conference took place. And as you mentioned, I sure got the feeling that it was, and it was that Tomlin kind of just tapped down that optimism, saying, look, Najee's a young guy. We would expect him to profess and kind of maybe speak it into action that he's going to play. But as I said on the on my terrible take on Tuesday there, that I don't know about this. And we'll obviously talk with Dr. Mel later on in this show here. If there's any question here, about that foot sprain and all like that, I'd be more apt to kind of sit him if indeed that's what it is, because there is some speculation out there that might be an ankle sprain or even a high ankle sprain. Who really knows? Tomlin seemed to say that this isn't related to the training camp injury that he had. Of course, coaches aren't always 100% truthful when it comes to injuries and all like that. So the first injury report of week 2 will be out Wednesday after practice. And we might be guessing on this thing going into Saturday, Alex, to be quite honest with you. I mean, if Najee ends the week listed as questionable, then we'll have to really pay attention to what happens on Saturday and whether or not a guy like Anthony McFarland is elevated from the practice squad.
Right. The elevations may tell us their plan for Najee Harris, really more than actual injury designation and status. I think Tomlin's commentary was a little bit more of Najee, I decide who's playing and who's not playing. And it's not necessarily your decision being a young guy overall. So talked about the need to practice and being a young guy. And so wants to show that, prove that he's ready to go and can handle the load. So even if Harris plays, I imagine there'll be probably a heavier rotation, probably actually a bit similar to the way that it was in week 1. As Harris deals with the injury, doesn't want to, put the entire weight of the offense on that injured foot. So even if he plays, it'll probably be in a bit more limited capacity, but we'll just see where the week takes us.
Yeah, look, if he suits up, he's not getting that full load. I mean,
right.
And in fact, you could probably see even a little bit more with them probably trusting Jaylen Warren a little bit more, probably see even a little bit more of him this week. But I think we might, there's no way you go into even you are going to elevate Anthony McFarland if Najee can't go, right? Is there any part of you that would think that this team would go into the game with just really two true running backs and Derek Watt back there?
No, that'd be pretty foolish when you can elevate a guy like McFarland. Watt actually was used as a third down back a little bit last week, but still, if you're only going with 2 true running backs and somebody goes down in the first quarter, you got one back left and Derek Watt, do the smart thing. I would be shocked if McFarland was not elevated if Harris does not play. Because
you're going to have Snell on special teams and you run the risk of him getting dinged or something like that, leaving yourself with just Jaylen Warren out there,
Right. So We'll see, and we'll find out if it's a foot or an ankle, I guess, on today's report. We'll get maybe some better clarification on what the actual injury is, and because usually
they can't just do lower body, right?
Not hockey, yeah. So we'll know a little bit more details on maybe what Harris is dealing with, if it's a foot, if it's an ankle, later today.
Okay.
What else did Mike Tomlin have to say at his presser, Dave? Anything else that caught your attention? I think his commentary on Jaylen Warren, saying, being asked how did Warren do his first time out in a regular season game, and Tomlin saying, well, he didn't urinate down his leg. I mean, that's very classic Tomlin, and that's probably a good description of the game, just a very colorful one.
Look, I thought Warren jumps off. Not a lot jumps off the tape when it comes to the offensive play in that game. Jaylen Warren jumped off the tape, man, and out in front blocking, and really a lot of stuff with how many times over the years we talked about running backs in the football, how they play when the football's not in their hands, and how underrated kind of that stuff is. And you got a good snapshot of Jaylen Warren in that game against the Bengals, and how he performed with the football not in his hands. Now, obviously, he didn't do too much in with the opportunities when the football was in his hands. But the fact that he's stepping up and plugging, stepping up and eating up grass and plugging blitzers, and out there on front blocking on a couple of those end around runs, that was great. And I don't know, to some degree, I kind of found it a little disrespectful from Mike Tomlin saying, well, at least he did urinate down his leg, kind of aspect there, because once again, I thought he jumped off the tape when it came to a couple of plays, and specifically with the football not in his hands.
Well, I think it was supposed to be a compliment, saying like he wasn't scared. I mean, he embraced the moment. But I mean, why not praise the good? In there without having to try to say, well, yeah, at least he didn't pee down. I'm being hypercritical or anal when it comes to Mike Tomlin's choice of words there. But I mean, I understand what he was trying to get at. I think you could have kind of phrased it a little bit better than that, though. Yeah, the phrasing certainly is interesting, but what I saw from Jaylen Warren against the Bengals is what I saw from him all summer. I think back to that first backs on backers drill, and what I saw against Cincinnati, him literally planting Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson are similar to what he did in those drills in Latrobe. And you see the practice carry over to game action, and that is why they do those kinds of drills. I think the two words that come to mind most with Jaylen Warren for me are competitive and fearless. Like, this dude is just all out all the time. I mean, he's going to do whatever he can and hustle and the effort. It's great conditioning. I mean, this guy just really attacks it, doesn't seem to be scared or intimidated or worried about anything. And I mean, that's just a really good place to start for him. So I just think the physicality that he brings and just the attitude, the demeanor he brings are pretty fun to watch for a rookie.
Right. And once again, we expect him to play a healthy amount of snaps, regardless of Najee Harris and his situation on Sunday against the Patriots.
Yep. So what else from Tomlin? I think those kind of the headliner type things. Anything else he said that caught your attention, Dave? I
mean, some well-due praise for Alex Highsmith, and talking about, there's just a natural maturation process that he's going through, and, continuing to see, him progress, and how they expect him to continue to progress. And I mean, that's another guy. I mean, there are a lot of people that jumped out on a defensive tape on the All-22, but he certainly did. And that's what they're going to have. I mean, they're going to need more of that out of him, specifically until TJ Watt gets back for sure. But a nice kind of compliment, if you will, and about Alex Highsmith from Mike Tomlin. And the other important aspect was, there was something we joked about how many snaps that the defense had to play in this game. And, every year the joke is, after they break these mandatory mini camps or break OTAs and then break the mandatory mini camp, is the message that Mike Tomlin delivers, especially specifically to all the rookies, about conditioning and all like that. And now we know why, because right out of the chute, one side of football is asked to play really 100 snaps, if you will. And there were 3 or 4 of them that played, 100% of the snaps there. So just a testament to why we kind of highlight what Mike Tomlin says almost really annually about conditioning being so important between, the end of the offseason program and the start of training camp.
And that's why he preaches it so heavily, even for a guy like Jaylen Warren stepping in and ended up playing a bigger role at the end of that game because of the injury to Najee Harris. I mean, that conditioning is important as well. But you're right. I mean, you had, 100 defensive snaps for Minkah and Edmonds and Witherspoon, and Edmonds played 7 on special teams. So he played 107 snaps in this game. And so I think his conditioning has always been overlooked, but it's been really valuable to him and to the team, his overall durability, availability, and he's just a really highly conditioned guy that can play 107 snaps and not, fade at the end of the game. And so I think that's an overlooked aspect of a lot of these guys, but particularly to me, Terrell Edmonds.
What'd you think about Tomlin's comments on the offense?
Yeah, I mean, it was, what did he say essentially? The growing pains of it, that you're trying to get better, trying to still learn about guys like Mitch Trubisky overall. And, maybe there was certainly a more optimistic tone than what I think a lot of fans have week 1, but it's really just about can you build upon this offense and continue to take steps forward and do it while you win, and maybe win a bit ugly early on, but can you, get this run game to be more efficient and get more downfield plays and certainly be a lot better on third down. 4 or 15 is not going to cut it going forward. But I think Tomlin just is coming from the lens of we knew this group would be a work in progress, and we're still trying to, trend and get better each week, not necessarily expecting the finished product out of the gate.
All right. Anything else that you said that worth discussing?
Yeah, I think his comments on Devin Bush, I think Tomlin certainly, as he gets a little bit more online, he probably sees some of the comments a little bit more these days. And so he was asked about Devin Bush's play and was it a big step? And he says, I wouldn't call it a big step. I'd imagine you guys would, because that was the narrative you guys were singing, but he did what we expected him to do, which was play winning varsity football. We'll talk about the All-22 a bit more later, but I thought Bush overall certainly looked a little different compared to last year, a bit more aggressive, taking on blocks, getting off blocks, being more active against the run. I thought it was an encouraging sign. Yeah,
I thought overall, based on what, dating back obviously to last year, we saw him use kind of that, the stuff that we saw in college with him going from middle of field to sideline to get in on plays and all, and that burst. He had that burst last year. He just wasn't making the amount of, wasn't making the plays, and at least he was more noticeable in the positive aspect of play overall. Was it a perfect game for him? Absolutely not. I think mostly was dinged coverage kind of stuff there, but he didn't hurt this team. And if anything, he provided a couple small positives in there overall. And based on what, once again, going back to last year, him moving in on the positive side of the ledger, if you will, is obviously a positive thing.
Right. Definitely there. So, all right, Dave, that wraps up, I think, the Tomlin presser pretty well. Should mention as well, and it's really no surprise, Minka Fitzpatrick has been named the AFC Defensive Player of the Week for his just elite-level performance against the Bengals. 14 tackles, a pick six, a pressure, of course, the extra point block, and just really an incredible game. I did the video this morning. You guys can check out on Steelers Depot, highlighting some of those big plays everyone remembers, but also highlighting some plays that are easy to forget. They get lost in the shuffle of that crazy, wild game. For as much as we talk about and rightfully praise Fitzpatrick's playmaking ability, his ball skills, what he does in coverage, to me, his tackling is really underrated. And of course, I don't want to see the guy make 14 tackles every single week, but what he does in the open field, coming to bounce and making some of these stops, is really overlooked and a vital key to preventing maybe some good plays becoming great plays for the opposing offense. He's obviously had some great games as a member of the Steelers since being acquired from the Dolphins. This might top to bottom. This might have been his best game overall, though. I think. Look, they're moving him around, and he's making plays from all over different portions of alignments and stuff like that. His tackling is just really spectacular, especially open field, the ability to
kind of settle and not not stop his feet too soon and still be able to make plays. And even on negative plays for the defense, the Joe Mixon run really sticks out in my head down the right side there, because it's a negative play, give up a huge chunk, 30 something yards on that run, but the fact that he was kept out. What was one of the big things last year? So a lot of those runs were ending in the end zone, and you're not saving yourself blades of grass to defend, like Mike Tomlin says. And the fact that Minkah was able to get the angle on Mixon, get him out of bounds, save some area to defend there, and it ended up being a 4-point swing overall there. So I mean, you're looking at a play that really was negative in overall in general for giving up such an explosive run on top of it there, but yet you can find some positive in it with what Minkah did there. And just, man, let me tell you, he has now got the character, and not that he didn't before this game, but he certainly does now. Some of the hits that he had in this game, and even though that hit in the end zone probably wasn't one directly responsible for causing the incompletion late in the game, because it looked like it might have been, dropped or banged off the hands or whatever there in that situation.
But that receiver heard footsteps. He knew Minkah was coming.
Right. That's what I'm getting at there. Right. His character, his reputation at this point is now making plays. And as I mentioned on the show the other day on Monday there, that hit on Jamar Chase over there on the sideline was very reminiscent of the play against Marquise Brown in the Ravens. And opposing wide receivers see this stuff, and the hit on Higgins and stuff like that. And that's going to make those receivers think twice when they catch the football about getting popped, if you will, there. So I think just by going back through the All-22 a couple times there, and then obviously going back through and watching your great video that you did on him, I'm not sure that wasn't Minkah's best game in a Steeler uniform.
I think you're right. And this guy's a hitter. Like, a lot of safeties are in one of two buckets. Either they're the strong safety, big physical, limited ball skills, not much range, but a missile downhill to fill the alley. Then you have the other guys that are the free safety types, a lot of range, great ball skills, or liabilities as tacklers. Minkah's both. I mean, he's that rare combination of being both guys, and that physicality, his hit power, the open field tackling, the technique, I think, again, really underrated. If you add up all of what Minkah did against the Bengals, he's got a pick 6, so that's 6 points. He saved a touchdown on that Joe Mixon run, that's 4 points, and blocked an extra point, that's 1 point. He's responsible for no less than 11 points in this game, which is crazy swing. I mean, it's so rare you could even pin that on a defender to be responsible for 11 points in any given game. So
directly, yeah.
Directly. Then you add in an extra point on the pick 6, so that's another point you want to give him to, and et cetera, et cetera. But at least 11 points. So, I mean, that's a level of dominance that, to me, it's just one step below what James Harrison did in 2007 against the Ravens on that Monday night. I still put Harrison as the gold standard, as the best all-time individual defensive performances, but Minkah very close behind what he did Sunday against the Bengals.
Yeah, not bad for a guy that supposedly just wanted to be tied to the post.
Right.
He's everything. He's anything but that one game into this season. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's not playing the slot role they had him last year, but he's not as stuck. I talked about this all summer, that Minkah was going to be unstuck this year, where they'd be able to rotate him, and there was a lot more inversions and rotations that allowed Minkah to not just be either, deep half or deep middle in cover 1. And so I think him being able to move around quite a bit is good for him and good for this defense.
How about we find a way now to not make him have to make 14 tackles in a game?
That's all. Well, not being on the field for 102 snaps will help, but even still, even if you make those numbers relative, I don't really know. I mean, the run defense wasn't bad, though, which is the thing. There was the play he had on Mixon, but I mean, they allowed even with that 3.9 yards per carry. So it was a lot of the in cuts, and Minkah, I think Minkah also being around the ball a bit more, not being as that deep free safety, increases his tackle numbers some. So I don't really know, what the root issue, quote unquote, was that led to so many tackles in this game.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think you kind of highlighted all the in-cutting routes and all like that, and obviously the big run there. They have just got to do a better job of not letting those guys kind of into the secondary a little bit there, especially in the middle of the field.
Right. I think the Bengals play action was pretty effective, but Minkah, I had in the video early in the game, had a great ankle tackle on Joe Mixon that if he does not make that play, Mixon may go for 30-something yards. And so I think there's still a little bit of just pursuit and run fits that have to be cleaned up a bit. That, the overall run defense numbers look encouraging, but I think Pittsburgh's front seven still left some things on the table in that game.
Yeah, look, containment. I mean, a lot of those yards Burrow, with his feet, and also you got to do a little bit of better job of making sure you keep your responsibilities there and escape lanes and stuff like that. But I mean, if you take it's easy after the fact to sit here and cherry pick and say, if you take this out and you take that out and you take that out, but from where they were last year against the run, and obviously a lot of that due to injury, very, very improved. And, they're going to play a Patriots team this week that's going to try to come out, I'm pretty sure, and say, we want to try to establish the run on you. We want to see how good your run defense is.
Sure, and that's not the most high-powered and potent offense, and their quarterback has a back injury, so you would expect them to try to run the ball. They got a couple of good backs up there, and Stevenson and Harris. So I'm sure they want to be a bit more, run dominant than what they were in week one, playing from behind. All right, Dave, do you want to talk about anything that Ben had to say on his podcast? He mentioned about Deontay Johnson's great catch and his relationship with Pat Freiermuth, but I mean, it was nothing, all that insightful, but anything you want to touch on from Ben's newest podcast?
Yeah, when's the schedule of that thing dropping so we can make sure that we can form our schedule about it? We're going to be talking about Ben said, I have a feeling, several times on this podcast throughout the season. But as you mentioned, there wasn't really anything earth-shattering overall. I thought some of him highlighting some of the conversations that he's had with Boswell was a little bit entertaining there. And I thought the praise that he gave to Freiermuth and how he wishes he got more than one season with him. He was talking about what else was there that stuck out that he said? When it got into the obviously late in the game there, he kind of wished he was out there, at that point. But he obviously he did say that he woke up, he wasn't all sore, black and blue on Monday either. So I think we've paid tribute enough to the Ben Roethlisberger podcast Tuesday edition enough with just that.
All right, I'm with you there. All right, Dave, we've watched the All-22. What are your thoughts? Anything new, whether you want to talk about offense, defense, special teams, in terms of more things you learned about this game going through the coaches film?
I like the few of the things that you highlighted. We saw a couple of different kind of groupings, if you will, on the defensive side of football. The big nickel's back. That was interesting to see. And I think they had success with that particular grouping overall. But I think overall, there's just several different guys that you can point to. I mean, we just spent obviously a lot of time talking about Minka Fitzpatrick and the great game he had. We just recapped a little bit how great a game that Alex Highsmith had. I mean, you're talking about those two guys, but yet you still have Cameron Hayward doing what Cameron Hayward does. I thought Ogunjobi did some good things against the run.
He was like really good. Like everyone said all offseason, he's bad against the run. I mean, I thought he was great against the run in that game.
Right. And what did I say after going through his film there, trying to defeat that narrative? There's mostly some missed tackle stuff, know? It wasn't the actual schematic, technique or things of that nature. I think mostly him being gigged. People will look at those PFF grades and not look at those PFF grades. If you kind of parse those things out properly and just not look at the overall score. And then, look, none of us really know how they grade these things anyway. I really think a lot of it was probably his poor run defense grades were mostly related to the missed tackle aspect of it there.
Right. And I know people could say, oh, he faced his former team, and I get that, but there was brand new starters on that side. Right. So they weren't the same. It was the same, maybe scheme to an extent, but it was different people, just for clarification's sake.
Right. I mean, and we could go down the list here. And once again, yes, Minka deserves a lot of credit for playing that game. Terrell Edmunds, I thought Terrell Edmunds played a pretty decent game overall in this one. That interception that Sutton made was fantastic and almost had a second one. Yeah, that was probably a holding call in there. But you have the corners coming up and continuing to make tackles and all like that. Miles Jack loves playing football, right?
What do you mean by that? I saw you tweet about that. Can you expand on what that means?
Just, man, some of his reactions after some of these plays that he wasn't even directly involved in. One of the plays I think was might have been Minka coming down low and making a play there. And this guy, he jumps off the tape with particularly with being in the right gap, and he might not make the play, but you can definitively see him in the right position that forces maybe a running back to go another direction there. So that jumps out. Overall, I think he had a good pass breakup in that game as well. I mean, once again, I think you could go down the list here. And I said before in the podcast right before the season started, I'm not so sure this defense will be as good as maybe a lot of people are putting it out there. I don't know, man. From top to bottom, and it'll be interesting, obviously, to see how they graduate from not having T.J. Watt for the next several weeks. But there was so much different good from more than just 1, 2, 3, even 4 players on a defensive side of football. We talked about the other day about the Millette coming off the corner on that play, the holy roller rule, and all like that late in the game, and what a big play that was. And even though it didn't count technically because of the rule, he gets up off the ground and helps go and track down Joe Mixon on that play on top of it there. So the totality of what you saw, I think, on defense really, really stuck out. And if you take away a couple of the Joe Burrow scrambles and the Joe Mixon big run, and I think one thing that they'll need to clean up is those in-cutting, in-breaking kind of quick pops, if you will, because look at Jamar Chase on one of those, he's going to the house if he doesn't drop that football probably, right? But football games are all about what? Making plays. And the team that makes more plays than the other one generally is going to be the one, that wins the football game there. But there was just so much good on the defensive side of football there.
There was. And again, it was really a full team effort. 23 defenders dressed in this game. 21 of them played at least one defensive snap. 19 of them played at least 15 defensive snaps. And so when you're in a situation when you're playing such a high volume and usually a high number of snaps, you better have a lot of people that are available to you. And Pittsburgh really got creative with their packages overall. We talked about their big nickel, the 3 safety package that Casey was being used in the preseason. Now Trey Norwood getting work there. I think we're going to see, and we did see a little bit of 3-3-5 going forward, which people have been asking about for years. Can they run the 3-3-5 defense? I said, yeah, I'm not against it, but I hadn't seen it before. I saw it some this game. And I think with TJ Watt being out, you may lean on that a bit more when you have, like I mentioned earlier, I think 2 inside linebackers, 1 edge rusher, and 3 defensive linemen to maybe not put as much on the plate of Jameer Jones or Delonte Scott or whoever the case may be. Take advantage of your deep defensive line and your talented guys there overall. So that's something to watch, I think, going forward. A lot of cover 2, a lot of too high shell in this game. I think that's partially to not get beat deep the way that, the Bengals got big chunk plays on Pittsburgh last year with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, etc. It was really heavily either like straight cover 2, some split field coverages, which was interesting, some cover 7, and then occasionally some cover 1 more aggressive blitzes. But even that Millette blitz was out of a cover 2 shell. So I think they kind of really had that as their base defense in this game, was playing too high. And to play too high and still stop the run, I think is a really good sign.
Right. They're going to get tested on that. I think, again, I think the Patriots are going to say, okay, you want to play too high? Here's our running game.
Right. Well, I mean, Pittsburgh may not play too high in this Patriots game. I think it was partially tailored to what the Bengals have done against this team in terms of getting so many big plays. Again, I think some of the in-cuts off of play action gave Pittsburgh trouble, but the structure felt different. But some of the split field stuff, some of the bracketing on Chase was interesting. I got a little stuck on what some of those coverages were. So I was kind of down the rabbit hole last night trying to find some of that stuff out. But
a couple of times, I think some box coverage in there, right?
In what sense?
Just, areas and boxes there, like we saw. I think kind of specifically going back in my head, some stuff against the Chargers a couple of years ago.
Okay, I'd have to go back and look at some of those plays. But yeah, I think some of the split coverage work, it was like 4/3. They were doing some pattern matching to that side. So some different wrinkles in there, but again, a lot of too high, probably more than what we've seen in the past from this team. But I think that was pretty specific to how the Bengals had been winning last year.
Or I guess more kind of triangle coverage, if you will.
I have to go back and check on some of the specific plays there overall. Offensively, I don't know if I came away with really a lot different takeaways. I thought the O-line and pass pro did a nice job overall. Again, that lack of a push in the run game's a concern. A lot of criticism for Mitch Trubisky not taking a lot of shots downfield. What's your maybe thoughts or response to people that say that?
I mean, he threw deep, 8 times in this game? He just, of 20 yards, at least that's what the charting says in there. Now, a couple of those weren't close, and one down the right sideline obviously wasn't close there, but there were shots down the field.
Yeah, I think there were shots.
And in fact, I think I saw on hold on here a minute here. Player profile, I think even has, let me find out here real quick. Deep ball attempts, they have him as 8. I have him as 7. But he was the number 1 ranked quarterback, I think, in deep ball attempts in week 1.
Yeah, so it's weird there's this idea that he didn't take a lot of shots. Now, again, some of them, maybe they weren't super efficient. There was the deep ball to Pickens that sailed out of bounds. There was some pressure where he kind of threw deep. But, I mean, I thought the Bengals, played a lot of too high, and so that naturally kind of makes you more conservative. I think, as Tomlin said, they didn't want to turn the football over, so that makes you more conservative as well.
He just wasn't hitting them.
Yeah, but, I mean, again, that it was a free play, but the throw he had to Freiermuth, a 26-yarder in overtime, was – I don't know how he saw Freiermuth and then made a great accurate throw, squaring his shoulders, rolling left, throwing right. I mean, again, there's no risk there because there's the penalty, but that was still a heck of a play.
Look, the attempts, obviously, when you drill this thing back down and you go through it, as you said, I thought the pass protection was fine. Okay, the run blocking leaves a lot to be desired still, for sure. You just see a lot of independent routes and all like that. And well, how much over stuff did you see? How much, there was a little bit of level stuff in there. In the run game, once again, I could do without seeing, as I mentioned the other day, Gunnar Olszewski being down low, asked to block down. I mean, you're just asking a guy to do something that he has no business kind of doing in those situations there. Could maybe we've seen some more quick slants in this one, or some, a little bit more usage of maybe some bubble screens or something, tunnel screens or something like that?
Maybe I don't. Maybe there weren't a lot of RPOs in this game. I'd have to go back and check. Usually those quick slants are often coming off of some of those RPO, package play kind of looks overall.
Lot of like comebacks and curls and stuff like that. Just it doesn't. Not a lot of route scheme combinations jump off the tape in the all 22 view.
Yeah, maybe some fewer boots than I thought I would see. There was obviously the one in the end zone that Trubisky did a good job just to avoid the safety there overall. But again, it was good to see Freiermuth use more vertically. I thought some of the offensive design and schemes had some interesting wrinkles to them, but there was still some messiness overall. Like I mentioned on Monday's show for this offense, guys not totally in sync and miscommunication and things like that I thought caused some problems.
Look, you're going to really have to rely on your defense to win a lot of games when you have air yards per attempt at 8 and a completed air yard distance of 5. Sure. You're going to have some long drives within that, on a consistent basis if that doesn't get better. And I think they had an adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat of something, and this was only with 1 sack and no turnovers, because those are interceptions and sacks obviously impact your adjusted net yards per passing attempt number greatly, and they didn't have those in this game, and the number is still 5 point something when it comes to that. You would expect a couple of sacks maybe to be driving that number down. So the root core, kind of that stat, I think tells a lot in there. As we said going into it, and I didn't think Mitch was as accurate as he probably could have been in this game. And I also thought a couple of those throws of his probably could have come out a little bit quicker as well as, on top of it there. So they got a lot of work to do. I mean, a lot of work to do on the offensive side of football here.
They do. I thought Trubisky was tough and made throws versus pressure, which is a good sign because that may be something that's required going forward. I thought
they faced a lot of man coverage in this. So
right. I thought the pass pro from the backs was actually really good. Talked about Jalen Warren. Najee Harris had a really good block on Trey Hendrickson, I think it was, and planted him kind of like a MMA type of takedown. So I don't think those guys get enough credit for what they do in terms of their pass protection.
His true completion percentage in this game, which is factoring in unpressured throwaways and drop passes and sorts, was just 58.3%. And that was, I think, ranked 29th overall in the quarterbacks in week 1.
Yeah, not great overall. But again, making those plays late, finding Freiermuth on the 26-yarder, then again to get in the field goal range. Even on that last play, which I still disagree with Pittsburgh even trying to run a play with 8 seconds left. There was miscommunication from the offensive line. D tackle comes free, and Trubisky just smartly gets the ball out of bounds, just throws basically a throwaway, but just not the wherewithal, not taking a sack, not trying to run around, just get the ball out and kick the field goal. Again, I think Pittsburgh was in the wrong to even try to attempt to play there. I know Ben said, "Oh, what's the harm? There's no risk." There's a lot of risk if you're doing that kind of stuff. You got sacks, you got penalties, you got turnovers, you got whatever. Time running out. If you complete the ball in bounds, I think Pittsburgh was in the wrong to even try to get one extra play there. But that aside, I thought Trubisky made in that final drive some decisive decisions.
Was he as bad? Look, people are going to continually downplay his play to try to get in an effort to try to get Pickett on the field. I'm sure, but if Trubisky isn't awful, and if Trubisky doesn't get hurt, he's going to be the starting quarterback for this team for the next several weeks here. There are a lot of people trying to paint this thing as an awful performance by Trubisky, and I'm not in that category. And we talked about too, what can this guy do in a crunch situation, in a 2-minute type situation, to get you down the field to win the game. And because they're probably going to be, as you highlighted, one score games, one possession games in there. There are probably going to be a lot of opportunities, unfortunately, for him to do such a thing. And Mike Tomlin essentially said this after the game. He didn't fold under pressure, and he got the team in field goal range and in overtime, and they won the football game. And I don't know. Yeah, you would like to see better top to bottom overall play with him. We'll see if it comes. I don't have great confidence in it being much better than maybe top to bottom than it was on Sunday there. But he still got you in a position to win the game, and the extended play on the free play played a big part of that. And There was one play though. Did you see the one on deep down in their own end? Was it a third down play there?
The Freiermuth?
Yeah. And people saying, "Oh no, you can't make that." You know, the Trubisky defenders come out and say, "Oh no, you can't make that throw after avoiding pressure. He's going to get popped by." If he leads Freiermuth and puts a little bit of a touch on that pass when coming up and coming out of the pressure there, I think he can make that throw.
I think it was a good decision. It's too high, middle of the field open, throw the seam. It was a bad ball placement. So I think it was a good decision. Bad ball was my take on that.
No, I'm talking on the one that he decided not to throw.
Oh, he didn't throw. Oh,
deep down on their own end where he avoided pressure and he ended up taking off with the football. There. I'd have
to go back and see it.
Yeah. I will send you a still.
I thought you were talking about the one that he threw to Freiermuth down the seam.
No.
The linebacker on him. Okay, I'm sorry.
Let me pull the still on that one for you, and I think you'll recognize it right off the bat here. Hold on.
Okay. Is this the one where he almost fumbled?
No.
Okay.
Here it comes to you. Wait a minute. Let me find you on. Don't you love dead air? Okay, there you
go. So what was your takeaway on this one again?
He's coming up, avoiding pressure out of the pocket there right before he takes off, and Freiermuth is actually working his continuing, kind of an extended play, if you will, to the open space in the direction of the numbers, the 30 specifically there. I thought he could have let the ball fly at that point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I get that point.
So that's one particular throw that I thought that he didn't make that he probably should have made. I think that was a third down.
Okay. Yeah, did it say third down? Is there a shot of the sticks in the in that photo?
I don't think so.
No, there's not. But I mean, it was a little Ben-like. You just kind of fight and rally and make some plays late overall. So it has to be better going forward. I mean, what Pittsburgh did is not sustainable to win continually, but it was enough to get victory in week one, and that's really all that matters.
I guess that's not very good radio there when you're talking about something that someone else can't see.
Well, people have come to expect it, I'm sure. But overall, yeah, I would not call what Trubisky did an awful performance. I thought it was fine. He made some big plays late, and hopefully you build on that going forward.
Dang, if I can find this play real quick here.
While you do that, I do want to mention a special shout out to Arthur Millette. Talked about him a bit earlier, but this guy played a lot more than Pittsburgh intended him to play. Once Levi Wallace went down with that ankle injury, Sutton had to stay outside, and that forced Millette to play in a lot more passing situations. And, utilized him as a blitzer, but Millette physicality, his tackling, his energy, I thought he stepped up into a bigger role because of the injury there to Levi Wallace.
All right, 3rd and 8 from the Steelers 10 in the second quarter.
Okay, so you're referencing for people to go back and check that one. Okay, yeah, I mean, there's always, when you throw the ball 30-plus times, there's always things to talk about, things you can work on, things you do well, and things you do poorly. But I thought overall Trubisky, there was one play where he bailed on a very clean pocket that I didn't love, but nothing that was so catastrophic that I thought, wow, it was a really bad game by Trubisky. It was not a bad game by Trubisky.
I guess they're not going to be in the habit of pulling their guards.
No, this is generally a zone-based team.
Right.
So, all right, Dave, any other thoughts on the All-22? I think that wraps it up. Right? The last thing is just, I've never had so much intrigue watching field goal reactions. I mean, it was just like the level of emotion watching all the field goals and overtime and late in the fourth quarter of the highs and lows from each side was just ridiculous to see.
Right, absolutely. And we know special teams. Benny Snell, Miles Boykin's just a fantastic special teams player.
Yeah, although he got once. There was the one rep where he got thrown into the sidelines, but he did a good job overall.
All right. It goes without saying that the extra point block was huge.
Right, for sure. And that's my terrible take today about the operation of a kick and the importance of all that. All right, Dave, I do want to talk to Dr. Mel here in just one moment, but before we do that, I want to hear from our friends over at my bookie. We got Thursday Night Football. Who's playing tomorrow? And
Chargers and the Chiefs.
Oh, wow, that's going to be a great game.
Right. And while the Chargers and Chiefs prepare for a battle of the AFC West on Thursday night, prepare for your winning season at MyBookie. Some like to bet to earn and some bet to make the season more exciting. Either way, MyBookie gives you the most for your money with a double deposit bonus. It's quick and easy. $250 deposit puts $500 in your account instantly, and you can use your funds to bet on as many games, contests, and props as you want. To claim your bonus, register today and use promo code terrible, like trying to set up a play that people can't see on a podcast. Terrible, designed to add more excitement to the games and sports you love. That's promo code terrible to double your money up to $1,000 with MyBookie. It's only week 2 of the NFL season, which means there's still plenty of time to get in on the action. Don't miss out. Begin your winning season today exclusively at MyBookie, mybookie.ag, and we ask you to please, once again, use promo code TERRIBLE to take advantage of this super promotion, double deposit bonus promotion that they've got going on.
All right, Dave, let's take a pause here. We'll come back with Dr. Melanie Friedlander, who's done excellent articles and writing and analyzing the injuries to TJ Watt and Najee Harris. Be sure to follow her on Twitter at Girl Surgeon. We'll take a pause here and come back with Dr. Mel. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as promised at the top of the show, we have a very special guest on today, our good friend who's done a tremendous job covering, unfortunately, all the serious injuries. We love talking with Dr. Mel, and we hate talking with Dr. Mel because that means something bad probably happened in Steelers land. But we are joined by Dr. Melanie Friedlander. Be sure to follow her on Twitter at Girl Surgeon. Dr. Mel and our friend Mel, how you doing?
I'm great. Good morning. Thanks for having me. And boy, I wish we didn't have these things to talk about.
We have to stop beating this way for sure. You've done a tremendous job outlining TJ Watt's pectoral injury, his situation, being able to outline what were the reasons he would potentially need surgery or go rehab. And obviously now that we know it's the rehab route. So if you just could give a brief overview of what injury he may be suffering from. We don't know the exact nature of it, but based on the pectoral nature and the fact that he does not need surgery, generally speaking, what does that tell you about what he's dealing with?
Sure. Well, most people, when they think about the pectoral muscle, they think about just the pecs that you see on the chest. And if anybody needs a quick look at what a great pec anatomy looks like, just go to Jonathan Heitritter's profile picture on Twitter. You can see all of the core muscles outlined very nicely. But the pectoralis muscle is basically, it originates or starts from the edge of the breastbone or the sternum, as well as, and then the muscle extends across the chest and has an insertion onto the upper bone of the arm, which I think a lot of people probably may not realize. Ligaments join bone to bone, tendons join muscle to bone. So there's a tendon that joins the pectoralis muscle to the humeral bone. And in athletes, that's most commonly the place where the tear occurs. The tear can occur between the muscle and the tendon, or the tendon can actually tear off the bone. When the tendon tears off the bone, that's automatic surgery. That's not going to get better by itself. And the surgery is basically done through an incision in the upper arm or near the underarm area. And the surgeon will just use sutures to anchor the tendon back to the bone. When the muscle tears from the tendon, the degree of the tear is what determines the treatment. So a partial tear can heal by itself because the muscle is still attached to the tendon to some degree. And so you just allow it to heal to itself. If it's a full rupture, obviously, that's not going to get better by itself because the muscle can retract onto the chest. So that does require surgery. And that's actually a little bit more of a difficult repair because suturing muscle is tough. I mean, the sutures just kind of pull right through the muscle. So surgeons have to develop various techniques where they can find a way to anchor the muscle to the tendon. Based on everything we heard over the last few days, I'm assuming that TJ has a partial tear of the muscle from the tendon. Again, if it was tendon coming off the bone, that's automatic surgery. That's most likely what his brother JJ had in 2019. And so it becomes a judgment call based on how much of the tear has occurred. And I think that's where you saw him going from doctor to doctor and looking for different opinions, because it wasn't clear cut that he definitely did not need surgery or he definitely did need surgery.
Does a roughly 6-week timetable to return sound right? Or is that optimistic? Or about how long would you expect somebody to be out dealing with? Let's assume you're correct in your assessment of what the exact injury is.
Yeah, if you look at the medical literature, 6 weeks is about right. The muscle fibers will not be at 100% strength at that point, but most patients will have good functionality by then.
When you, what is it? Obviously scans were done on this. Why is it needed that you have so many opinions on that? If there's really just, let's say a set of like 3 scans or whatnot. Why is there, in other words, why so many doctors involved when they all should be seeing the same thing?
So nothing in medicine is 100%. When you're taking your exams in medical school, if you're looking at the answer and one of them is always or never, that's not it. And, so it's not black and white. If it was a very minor tear, I think they would look at the MRI and say, okay, clearly we don't need to do surgery here. If it was a very significant tear, they would look at it and say, surgery is necessary. But when it's somewhere in between that, it becomes a gray area. And when you're looking at an elite athlete of TJ's caliber, you want to get him back on the field, but you also want to make sure that whatever medical decisions you're making don't impact him in the long term. You want to make sure that when he comes back on the field in 2023, he isn't suffering from any long-term consequences of the decision you made this year. So I think going from doctor to doctor was the team and the players' attempt to make sure that the decision they made this time is the right one. I can, knowing everything we know about TJ Watt, he's probably going to do everything he can to salvage this season. He's one of the most dedicated players we've seen on this roster in a long time. But you also want to make sure that if they go the non-surgery route, that it does heal properly and that he doesn't have any long-term issues. There was a study a few years ago that looked at surgery results versus non-operative results. And interestingly, they saw that the surgery results gave better functionality long-term compared to non-operative results. There have been other studies since then that argue the opposite. And I think because the data isn't clear, doctors are going to take this decision very seriously.
Is there anything he can do? Is it more of just a rest in time kind of thing? Is there anything specifically that helps in speeding that process or making sure it's not rushed too soon? What's he got to do on his end?
The early days are going to be the RICE treatment: rest, ice, immobilization, and elevation. And so once the initial inflammation goes down, then you get into the elite athlete treatment course. And so one of your readers had commented on my post the other day, like, would hyperbaric oxygen therapy be an option? Okay. It definitely might. You could see them doing potentially ultrasound treatments. I very much doubt that PRP or any kind of stem cell treatment would be used. That's a little bit extreme.
And then Willie McGinnis was on NFL Total Access, I think, yesterday or the day before. Is he indeed probably going to have to wear a harness when he returns? And what kind of how limited do you think he will? How non-TJ will he be in the first couple of weeks upon return?
There's a really good chance he'll be in a harness initially. Not every player is. I think we saw JJ wearing a harness when he first came back from his injury. Obviously, when Juju Smith-Schuster came back from his shoulder surgery, which is a different injury, he wore a harness in the wildcard game last year. You always think that's going to be very limiting to the players, but actually, I don't know how much that will keep him from performing the way he wants to. Willie made a great point, which is that for the linebacker position, recovering from this injury is more difficult than for, say, a place kicker or some other player who's not using their upper arms and their upper body in such a chaotic way. I mean, we've all seen him as a game wrecker, and that involves a lot of pushing and upper body efforts. So will TJ Watt be 100% TJ Watt when he comes back in 4 to 6 weeks? No, I don't think so. But I would take 75% of him gladly.
One final question for me, at least on TJ Watt here. In my mind and reading out everything that you have out there and everything that's out there from everybody at this point, does it make the most sense that we're looking at probably a post-bye week return just to give him a little bit of that extra time there? In other words, I guess that'd be week 10 against the Saints. Does that sound like about the ideal time frame to see him back?
I think if you're going to put money down on it, that's the safest bet. I also think that when we're talking about a player like TJ Watt, all bets are off. He's going to attack his rehab the way he has with every other injury. And if there's any way he can get on the field sooner, I'm sure that he will. With other injuries, he has sometimes exceeded my expectations and come back sooner. There have been times I've been wrong on him and he's been out a week or two longer. So it's tough to predict, but I think that's probably the safest estimate.
When Watt does return, is there any chance of re-injury given they're going with just the rehab process? Is there any risk of him being more prone to tearing that muscle again or that tendon?
Probably not. I mean, they're going to be evaluating him both physically and with MRI. And I think that the team will have a great level of confidence that it's properly healed before they let him back on the field. Gotcha.
I do want to switch now to running back Najee Harris and his foot injury he's dealing with. Tomlin says it's not related to the Lisfranc sprain that he suffered in training camp, but you had the article today people should check out on Steelers Depot talking about the potential of a lingering issue for Harris. So it sounds like he's got a good chance to play against the Patriots, but to your point, it's really what level of health is he going to be at this week and going forward?
Yeah, so Coach Tomlin said it wasn't a re-aggravation of his Lisfranc, but Coach Tomlin also said Najee just got his foot stepped on day one of training camp. Mr. I will downplay every injury I can, so I take that with a grain of salt. I am worried about Najee having aggravation of his Lisfranc. It's just such a difficult injury. I mean, you remember with Senquez Golson, it basically derailed his entire career with the Steelers. The timing is good for Najee in that he has time to recover and still have a long season. But I think they need to be careful with him. You know, midfoot injuries are very serious injuries for running backs. He's got to have that push off or that burst in order to do his job well. And if the bottom of his foot is weakened, he's not going to have that. And of course, the slower he is, the more likely he is to get tackled and then re-injured. I mean, we all cringed when we saw him go down with his leg bent underneath him. Here's my speculation with Najee, and obviously I'm just making an educated guess. I think he had one of the most minor Lisfranc injuries possible where the bones in his foot were not separated at all. Like the alignment was still perfectly normal because the team really treated that, very conservatively. I mean, he wasn't even in a boot for 6 weeks, which is the standard treatment for a Lisfranc injury. We also saw him walking around on the sidelines of training camp with no shoe on.
Right.
So I think it was probably a very minor Lisfranc from the start. And my guess is that when he went down on Sunday, it was 75% pain and 25% frustration that the injury could be back, because we saw a very sort of dramatic reaction from him on the ground. And then he managed to limp off the field. I think the boot that they put him in at the to go home was precautionary. And if he's already saying he's going to practice and play this week, that tells me that he's not having any instability or pain with weight bearing. Again, Najee's the guy who's going to push to get back on the field. So Coach Tomlin may be saying, whoa, rather than sick him here.
There was some speculation that might be an ankle injury versus aggravation of the foot sprain. Did anything jump out off the TV tape that would lead you to say that's not an ankle injury? A high ankle sprain?
Yeah, not really, because it's not the mechanism for a high ankle sprain, and he wouldn't have been out of the boot that quickly. And he certainly wouldn't have been talking about practicing this week. And it didn't look like the right mechanism really for a low ankle sprain either. So my guess is still that it's some aggravation of the foot injury. Again, if it's a low ankle sprain and he plays, I'm not worried about that at all.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously the first injury report of week 2 will be out Wednesday after practice, and I would bet he's either limited or does not practice there. And Saturday might end up being the telling day more than anything of whether or not they elevate, a guy like Anthony McFarland from the practice squad. So it might be a guessing game. If you were to take a best guess right now, and obviously we're recording this on Wednesday and the first injury report isn't out. You betting Najee plays or you betting Najee doesn't play?
I'm betting he plays, but he might be on a snap count.
Okay.
Would it be the smart move to play him? Do you think they should give him a week just to allow himself to heal a little bit, given that this could be a lingering problem?
I don't live in my fears, but
I'll live in them for you.
But I also don't want my star running back gimpy for the entire season. And
right.
These foot injuries are challenging. And so if I had inside information that this was a re-aggravation of his Lisfranc, and knowing that they really took the least and most minimal approach to his treatment initially, I'd sit him this week.
Gotcha. Understood. All right. That's going to go ahead.
But knowing what we know about Najee and Tomlin and the Patriots coming to town, I think he'll get a helmet.
Right. Sitting a guy in training camp in Latrobe's different story than sitting a guy when there's wins and losses on the line. So, Dr. Mel, can't thank you enough. Be sure to check out all of our articles on TJ Watt, and especially the one that went up this morning called "The Doctor is In. Najee Harris may face a lingering issue." Be sure to follow her on Twitter at Girl Surgeon. Dr. Mel, we love you. We thank you so much. We also hope we don't have to talk to you real soon, and hopefully this team stays healthy. But I know if anything happens, we'll ring you and certainly appreciate all your expert insight.
Love you guys. Thanks for having me.
And again, our many thanks to Dr. Mel, who's done a fantastic job. I know she's so busy with her actual job as a surgeon, but to offer her time both in the articles and on the podcast here this morning, can't thank her enough. She's really helped explain, certainly to you and I, the layman's people, about the Watt injury, and I thought her insight on Harris is definitely spot on.
Boy, and her turnaround time too on those posts, man, just phenomenal, and had people flocking to the site, as you would imagine, to read that kind of stuff. So what a man, we are so blessed to have her, and obviously for her to take time out. And people got to remember, when we record this, I think we were trying to get her on the Zoom call at like 6:45 Pacific time to do that interview that people just heard there. So she goes the extra mile, and we certainly do appreciate it.
Yeah, everyone loves, anytime I think people see the phrase "the doctor is in," they come running to that article because they know it's going to be quality, insightful, and level-headed. And so we certainly appreciate that from Dr. Mel. Dave, I want to get to our reader emails here in just one moment, but a little bit of semi-related Steelers news. The XFL announced their coaching staffs for the league that starts in February. Knew that Hines Ward and Rod Woodson would be head coaches of the San Antonio and Vegas teams, respectively, and also some former Steelers coaches joining those staffs, including Joey Porter, going to be the linebackers coach for Hines Ward's squad. I think Woodson has some assistants as well, and I think Darren Perry and Ray Sherman. So I just wanted to give a quick update there on Porter, especially. Looks like he's found a new home in coaching.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the reader emails here from Bryce. Quick question. What were the new wrinkles that you noticed from Austin as a DC that maybe didn't see as much from last year? And I think you've really already highlighted them, some of the personnel groupings, right?
Yeah, it can be tough to attribute exactly what is Austin versus what is the group versus, Tomlin as a decision maker overall. But again, a lot of personnel groupings, a lot of different, uses of people, again, talking about their big nickel, their big base, their 3-3-5 defense, some of the combination things they did. Yeah, I don't know if the cover 2, how much you can attribute that overall, if that was just a one-off thing for the Bengals game plan, or if we'll see that, going forward. The league is generally trending towards more too-high football overall to defend the high-flying attacks of teams like Kansas City. So it's probably a little bit early to talk about how many changes there's been. And injuries can obviously impact the way that a team game plans and what they call, and what injury could have an impact on that. But I thought overall, certainly utilizing their people and different looks was interesting in this game.
Jay Schmidt writes in, goal line schematics. What a freaking game, he says. The highs and lows of a Steelers game is unmatched, but a win is a win, and I'll never complain about a win. My observation and concern has been for a while now is the goal line offense. This offensive line and tight ends are not good run blockers, so why does the offensive staff insist on using 12 and 23 personnel when all the way down the field you use 11 personnel, which is by far their best personnel? I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Look, the tight end blocking wasn't great in this game.
No.
It really wasn't. And that's you talk about Pat Freiermuth and really even Zach Gentry, because Zach Gentry's come a long way, I think, in his blocking. Both those, if they are indeed going to run that much two tight end personnel, the whole blocking across the whole offensive line has got to be better, especially run in particular. But when you ISO, I think, and I did this yesterday on Freiermuth, I think he's got to be better better in blocking.
I agree, but yeah, I thought the whole goal line running attack was really poor overall. There was zero push from the entire front there.
People on the ground. I mean, what did stick out to me was James Daniels was on the ground. We talked about last year about Kendrick Green being on the ground. It's starting to stick out where I'm starting to see James Daniels on the ground.
Was there any common theme? Was that in the run game? Was that him on zone schemes? Or
mostly on run screen, run in the run game. I think. Okay.
I'll have to go back and check that. But yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. Should you spread the field out?
Mason Cole losing his, trying to anchor and losing his footing down there low and slipping down. One time that you had Watt in the game as the fullback down there in particular. He's trying to get into lead block for Najee and just no crease whatsoever. Just running it. You're just running bodies in the bodies.
Right, it was a problem. So it's a fair assessment to say, should they try to spread things out, lighten the box, and run off of that? That's not a bad thought.
Let's see here. Richard Jameson, please help me understand the status of Ryan Anderson. I thought he was suspended for 6 games in 2021. He was released 2 days later after the suspension was announced. Sounds to me like he did not serve out a suspension yet. He says, what am I misunderstanding? Should he be starting his suspension now rather than practicing with the Steelers? No, I think the fact that you've got to miss those games, whether you're, in other words, you can't play in those games. I don't think the suspension is related to being on the roster. It just, you cannot play in those first 6 games.
Right.
2021.
You can be a free agent and still serve that suspension. And that's one reason why he was a free agent, because he was suspended. So that went into effect and was served last year.
Eloise Marks writes in, hello, King David and Alexander the Great. Oh man, people, for us being 0-1 with our picks against it, we don't deserve salutations like that, I don't think. Defense obviously played a great game. All credit goes to them, but how much do you think the Bengals barely tackling and playing in camp and preseason played into their poor performance? Not specifically Steelers related. I've been watching full games from the late 2000s, Peyton's Colts, old Pats, etc. Is it just me, or is the NFL so much faster now and so much more horizontal than vertical? Guys look so much more athletic, more than ever. Y'all are the best. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, great. The game has changed, Eloise, for sure. It is all about speed and athleticism and getting players singled up and in space and taking advantage of playmaking ability. It is much more horizontal than vertical, although you still have teams like the Bengals that you're going to see and really, I think, like the Vikings and now the Dolphins. If you got guys like Tyreek Hill, man, did you see how they got him open on one of those plays? And that's just another thing you see kind of what other teams do, and the Dolphins specifically, and them using that motion and specifically against like man coverage and the timing of it all to get people freed up out in space like that. I mean, I was going through some Dolphins tape last night, looking at that, or trying to pre-study for the Patriots game and all like that. And it is all about a lot different athleticism than it was, even 10, 12 years ago.
Definitely, and a lot more horizontal game, as you mentioned, and the reader mentioned as well. In terms of the Bengals and their lack of reps, it's hard to say. I think it's hard to find a direct correlation. I mean, obviously they came, so close to winning that game. And if we had, done that, if they had won that game, we wouldn't be asking this question right now. I do think the fact they didn't really play their offensive line much and they had 4 new starters, that certainly gave them some problems and some difficulty. And Kim Hayward pointed that out. I think yesterday Hayward did on the Rich Eisen shows. And so that's probably one thing they're dealing with, is the newness of that. While that's more talented and probably will become a better offensive line, when you have 4 new starters, there's some growing pains with that. And I think Hayward was right to point that out.
And look, that's something I mentioned to Paul Dana the other day, right? When we talked to him.
We did. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
About, how will this play a factor in this? I did go also and listen to one of I think it was Steve Belichick, and listen to his press conference from yesterday. And, evidently Patriots had a little bit of a chore in the tackling department. He says, generally you see tackling at the beginning of the year not as good as it is as the season progresses because of how much they're able to address that. Now the Steelers had a lot of thudding and tackling during camp and preseason, obviously, right?
They did. I mean, they're known as probably the most physical camp overall. So I don't know what their missed tackle. I can probably check. Well, I don't have a percentage on it, but I mean, Pittsburgh, had some missed tackles in this game. I don't know how that relates to the rest of the league, though.
Hold on. I'll tell you real quick how many missed tackles they did supposedly have in this game overall. Pull it up here. Missed tackles. They have Terrell Edmonds down for 3 in this game. I don't remember 3. I mean, I think I can remember 2. Malik Reed 1, Highsmith 1, Arthur Millette 1. Was the Millette one the missed one on the sack? Maybe could that have been that? Miles Jack 1. So they have, believe it or not, they have the Steelers down for 7 missed tackles in this game. But they had the Bengals down for 7 missed tackles as well. I just think I don't think the ones the Steelers had were as egregious, if you will.
Yeah, the reason why I paused was, I mean, for Pittsburgh, when you play 100-plus snaps, their 7 missed tackles are going to look, quote-unquote, better because it's a better percentage. So that's why I was saying, I mean, I pulled up PFR, and they have Pittsburgh with 5 missed tackles. But what's that in terms of a percentage relative to the rest of the league? And according to PFR, and so the numbers are a bit different, but they have Houston with the most missed tackles. It says they had 17 missed tackles in their opener. The fewest, they say the Raiders and Chargers had 0 missed tackles in their Week 1 game.
Wyatt Hubbard writes in, let's have some fun. He says, over or under 7 quarterback sneaks in the 2022 season. And I'm guessing he means for the Steelers. I look at that number right away. That's a lot of quarterback sneaks in the season. So I would go under right away, no matter, even Trubisky in there, or at some point maybe Pickett. I would take the under on 7 quarterback sneaks. Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. Yeah, I would take the under.
Hi, I'm Alan Kozora.
I've been called worse.
You take the under, you say?
Yeah, I would take the under. Yeah.
Christopher King, Trubisky comment and inside linebacker question. Reading through the comments on most of the posts on the site make me feel for Trubisky. Many fans are hoping he fails just to see Pickett play. He says Pickett looked better than I expected in the preseason, but the regular season is a different beast. Now to the actual question. Do you think Robinson dresses over Spillane this season regardless of health? Did I hit this the other day? I think I did, didn't I?
I think so. I know we touched on Spillane and Robinson.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Spillane gets inactive over. Robinson could dress, but it wouldn't come at Spillane's expense.
All right, I think we're doubling back into some of the comments here, so I think we're caught up on that. Anything else to add before we wind this thing down?
I think we're good. We'll hear from some of the players today, and we'll come back for Friday's show.
And obviously the injury report hits after practice on Wednesday, first one of the week. And you and I will start getting, and the rest of the crew, heavier into the Patriots tape. And we will have scheduled to have Ben Bolin on the Friday show. So a lot moving ahead here in these next couple of days as we get in more and more into week 2 action for the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Patriots on Sunday at Acrisure Stadium. So with that, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alan Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Also follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do, I want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you want an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar. Get an ad-free version for like $25 that way as well, too. Shout out again to Dr. Mel for coming on the show. Shout out to all the great contributors on Steelers Depot as well, too. Shout out to Alexa Delarocco as well, too. Got to ring the cancer bell just a few days ago as well too. Obviously, she works for the site and says has had to take kind of a leave of absence, if you will, but she's always in our thoughts and prayers, and so good to see her be able to ring that cancer bell again. We love you, Alexa, if you listen this far into the show, and we hope to get you back doing some of these terrible takes fairly soon as well too. So with that, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.